Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of the Basta Review. This time around I'm looking at Starrcade 89. This event took place December 13th, 1989 at the Omni in Atlanta, Georgia, and differs from past Starrcades in that it's entirely Iron Man and Iron Team tournaments. These are round-robin matches involving 4 men or teams, and points are given out depending on the outcome, i.e. 20 points for pitfall submission, 15 for countout. You get the picture. We start off the night with a rematch from Halloween Havoc as Doom takes on Rick and Scott Steiner. I am by no means a fan of Doom. They're completely bland, interchangeable characters that serve little purpose other than being faceless heels. This is a similar by-the-numbers match from my last review. Scott spends an impressive amount of time in the ring taking punishment, only to get the hot tag to Rick 2 minutes before the time limit. It ends a chaotic countout with only Rick in the ring, thus the Steiners pick up 15 points. I'm giving this a 6 out of 10. Then we have our first singles tournament match of the night as Sting and Lex Luger do battle. I find it silly and unbelievable that Lex decides to leave the match just as it starts when the crowd mocks him, and yet as US champion doesn't grab his title while exiting. You'd think he'd want to retrieve it if he truly was leaving. From there we get an average humdrum bout that sees Sting do more dominating than he really should and a few miscued maneuvers. You can tell these guys haven't worked with each other much at this point, if at all. The end comes out of nowhere, but is passable. Sting and Luger are fighting on the edge of the ring. They go tumbling over the ropes into the ring, and Lex uses the ropes to pin Sting. It felt like both men were just going through the motions. Where's Luger's hatred of Sting for befriending Flair? Could have and should have been vastly better. I'm giving this a 5 out of 10. After that, the Road Warriors face Doom, which I find kind of odd. You'd think they'd face the Wild Samoans first, giving Doom a longer chance to rest up, but whatever. This is a very short match, and I think they might have cut some of it from the video I watched. See, even they know it was a pretty average match. Hawk and Animal come out on top, picking up 20 points, which doesn't surprise me in the least. I'm giving this a 5 out of 10. The Great Muta takes on Ric Flair, and this is a prime example of how to bury a wrestler. Until now, Muta has been undefeated. You'd think this would go the distance, lasting a good 10 to 15 minutes to really make it epic. Even though Flair still ends Muta's streak, at least then the World Heavyweight Champion would have helped the TV Champion rise up the ranks and possibly challenge for the US title in the near future. Instead, Flair beats him in less than 2 minutes, and like a whimper, Muta's streak comes to an end. No build-up, no pomp and circumstance, and a chance to make a new star is squandered. The crowd eats it up, but it leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. Even though I shouldn't rate it because it's hardly a match, I'm damn disappointed, so I'm giving it a 2 out of 10. After that, the Road Warriors take on Rick and Scott Steiner in an entertaining match, at least until the end. Both teams do a great job of wearing each other down. At one point, Scott gives Hawk a belly-to-belly suplex from the second ropes, but they change camera angles mid-move, which pretty much ruins the view. The end sees the Steiners win when Animal holds Scott up while Hawk is doing a diving clothesline. Animal leans back into a pin, but Scott gets his shoulder up while Animal doesn't. You know, it's weak endings like this that take a solid match and push him down a peg or two. I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. Up next, Sting takes on the Great Muta in what I believe is their rubber match. Both need a win here to potentially break even, having lost their first match. It's decent enough, though again it runs short just under the 9-minute mark. Muta does a nice grounded double chicken wing submission with a bridge, which Bryan Danielson makes famous years later as the cattle mutilation. I'm okay with Sting beating Muta since Muta won in their first outing. Perhaps it should have been Sting who had ended Muta's streak. I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. Then the Wild Samoans of Fatu and the Samoan Savage take on Doom in a 5 or so minute time waster. There's really nothing else to say. I'm giving this a 3 out of 10. After that, Lex Luger takes on Ric Flair, but for some reason the video I have only shows the last 5 minutes of the match. I'm not going to rate it, but I will say I'm okay with it going to the 15-minute time limit. The Wild Samoans take on Rick and Scott Steiner, and I gotta say, not only is the Steiner's entrance music goofy and inappropriate for the team, but for some reason it drowns out Jim Ross, so you can hardly hear him talk. Again, they cut out the first 10 or so minutes of this match, so I'm not going to rate it, but I really have to question the logic of the Samoans winning by disqualification after fighting for 14 minutes, and the way they go about the disqualification is quite lame. Lex Luger and the Great Muta face off in a match that gets cut again, so I'm not going to rate it. Muta wisely goes after Luger's left leg, which Flair attacked when he faced Luger, and gets in a few nice submissions, but I'm really disappointed by the end. Muta blows his mist into Luger's face, and thus Lex picks up the win. So instead of giving each individual man a win in some capacity, the NWA decides Muta doesn't deserve one. I suspect politics played into this decision, or perhaps Muta had told them he was leaving, because a couple months into 1990, he goes to New Japan Pro Wrestling. Still, it's a lousy way to show you don't care about a talented wrestler. After that, the Wild Samoans take on the Road Warriors in the final tag team tournament match, which turns out to be alright. There's really little of consequence that happens up until the end when Chaos hits, allowing for Hawk to give the Samoan Savage a diving clothesline for the pin. Thus, the Warriors win the Iron Team tournament, which they definitely earn. I'm giving this a 6 out of 10. Finally, and boy am I glad this is the final match, Sting takes on Ric Flair. Thankfully, this was a match I was looking forward to, and it doesn't disappoint. Flair gives Sting a nice delayed vertical suplex into the ring, after fighting with him on the outside mat and sending him into the guardrail. Then he goes for an abdominal stretch before falling backwards into a cover. He also does a nice double underarm suplex. Later on, Sting gives Flair a suplex over the ropes into the ring for good measure. Towards the end, Flair focuses on Sting's left leg, first with a figure 4, and then with multiple strikes, hoping to wear him down for another figure 4. But just as Flair goes for it, Sting grabs him and pulls him into a roll-up for the cover and the pin. This allows Sting to win the singles Iron Man tournament, which I'm more than content with. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. Post-match, Ole and Arn Anderson come out, but just as you think they might attack Sting, Rick raises Sting's hand, followed by Arn, while giving the 4 Horsemen sign. Honestly though, I can't see Sting as a horseman, and it's just as well as his membership doesn't last long when he and Rick have a falling out a few months later. Overall, this is a really hard show to get through. I like tournaments, but I'm not a fan of round robins. It always seems like you limit the number of wrestlers you can get on the card. As well, you've got 2 tournaments going on at the same time. They should have stuck to the singles Iron Man tournament and complemented the show with some other things. I'm also disappointed with the way they booked the Great Muta. He couldn't win one of the matches. Finally, this is Starrcade, their biggest show of the year, and they decide to have a tournament. What a bad idea. Outside of the main event, there's little of consequence here, and it's not a show I can recommend. I'm giving this a 5 out of 10. Thank you for listening. Please tune in again when I review another wrestling DVD in my collection or anything else that crosses my path.